Well, once again, after a week off, we are back here on the Fight Guys. My name is Erik Apple, and this time we have, so we're going to change it up a little bit, change gears, and we're going to get into some promotions and how the fight game works. Welcome, David Arvelo. Are you the CEO or are you the promoter for Stronghold?
Well, both. Yeah, I'm the CEO and licensed promoter of Stronghold Fights.
Awesome. Now, tell everyone about Stronghold, and I know our first event is going to be November 22nd. I'm actually going to have the opportunity to be there with you. I love the marketing, but you kind of tell the story.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been on the business side of the sport for a long time now. Started initially on the promotional side of the sport. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was about a decade and a half ago, pretty much. Then in 2014, right before I got married, I got involved in the management side of things as well. Worked for a few different agencies in that space. I help run things for Upper Sports Management here in the U.S. It's a sports agency that's based out of Mexico. We represent a lot of great up and coming Latin American talent, as well as great prospects here in the U.S. But I've always been involved in the promotional side of the sport. That's where I come from first. I come from the regional scene, and unlike most people, I actually really like it. I think a lot of people look at the regional scene as, a means to an end. Oh, it's it's whether it's bush league, farm level, however they want to refer to it as. I think a lot of emphasis hasn't been placed on it, but I've always enjoyed it. A lot of people think it's a grind, which it is. And, maybe it's not as big or as outwardly sexy as, being involved with, UFC level stuff and everything, but it still plays an integral role in the sport. And I've always just kind of believed in that. It's if you don't have a good functioning, like a well-functioning farm system, where do, the Lerone Murphys, where do the Sadiq Yusufs, where do the Dan Igues come from? And those are all guys that, came up through a strong regional, scene. And I have had the ability to kind of work with a lot of guys like that over all these years. Right. So, I've worked with a lot of different promotions over time, and, into this spring, I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia. That's my hometown. It's where I spent a lot of my life, and a lot of people have been asking me to come back and do events. I'd kind of just been taking a bit of a break, and a good friend of mine who you also know, Matt Aptaker, he hit me up and just kind of broached the subject and just told me that at this point there was no reason that I shouldn't be running my own events, and why continue to do it for
He knew you were a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much. That's kind of what the regional scene can be sometimes, right? But so we kind of started talking about it, and we wanted to do something a little bit different. We wanted to have different type of name, different type of branding, different type of message. It's just there's a lot of great promotions out there, but it's just we didn't want to do something that was essentially a reskinned cookie cutter version of what a lot of these other, regional shows, are doing, have been doing, whatever. So,
sure.
Obviously we're in Richmond, Virginia, 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. and
NASCAR country.
Yeah.
I've been there. I've been in Virginia, North Carolina, all that, a lot, quite a bit. Is Richmond one of those places that smells like a tobacco field?
No.
Because a lot of Virginia does.
Yeah, so most of Virginia is pretty rural, but Richmond, Virginia, a lot of your big tobacco conglomerates are headquartered there.
Yeah,
but that's just the office buildings and the campuses. It's not the actual production.
It's pretty interesting. Like when people go to Virginia who haven't been there before, they're like, "What does that smell?" You're like, "Bro, they still grow tobacco here. Like this is where cigarettes come from.
It's like
still the biggest industry in the state, right?
Tobacco country,
Yeah, and then so talk to us about the marketing angle of Stronghold, because we're going to come at it from a conservative point of view, which honestly I think is brilliant. I think 80% of fight fans are already conservative as it is. I feel like they're going to naturally identify and be a fan of this show because they're going to feel like it's catering to them.
Sure. Yeah. I would agree with you in terms of like the sentiment and on like, the demographics of, the sports, sport of, MMA and just fight fans in general. And I also think too, I think for a while, people were letting kind of a minority amount of folks' stances on kind of fringe issues dictate a lot of other things that, go into, a business, like not wanting to advertise with certain companies because maybe the CEO of that company has voiced some conservative viewpoints on social media, or not wanting to get involved with anything in the, firearms or gun rights space or anything else, which, I think most people would agree. America is a cross section of all different types of, demographics, whether they're, ethnic, religious, cultural, political, whatever. Right. And I think most people kind of fall into that center, but it's like they were kind of really like not allowing people to kind of freely express themselves, as well as just, at the end of the day, like say, for example, not wanting to touch the issue of firearms,
Sure.
in terms of a sports marketing perspective. I'm sure you've read, and it's out there, various firearms companies have tried to have Super Bowl ads for forever, and they can't even throw enough money at it to get them.
I never knew that.
Air the commercial. Daniel Defense, it was publicized years ago. They were willing to pay a very substantial amount of money to have just a commercial for their products advertised in the Super Bowl. Super Bowl wouldn't take their money.
That's really crazy. I mean,
would not be bad.
It's almost like it should be. I mean, listen, on one hand, you want to say, hey, you own your own business. It's a free country. You don't have to allow someone to advertise. But on the other side, you want to think, well, if they're not advertising an illegal product, then you should take their money.
Yeah, I mean, that exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, firearms are not only a legal product, it's also a constitutionally protected right for us. And to say that you can't publicly advertise things like that, or really any legal product that wants to advertise, on your platforms, I think just kind of takes things a little bit too far. And, I say that as someone who, I think like most of us, I might lean different ways on different issues depending on what they are. I don't think many people fit neatly into one box on either side of the political aisle or another. But I just think that with Stronghold, it's just, I think nowadays certain things like gun rights, advertising with companies with a more conservative message, what's the issue with that? But I think across all sports, it's been kind of this unspoken problem for a very long time.
Yeah, most of the sports leagues have been generally supportive of the quote unquote left, whatever that is. I mean, everyone has a different definition of that.
Sure.
And tell me a little bit about your experience. I know you were involved with an Egyptian wrestling medalist. I remember we commentated him for XMMA. He was one of your guys as well, correct?
Yes. So that was at a previous agency that I worked for. You're referring to Mahmoud Sebi.
Yes.
Awesome guy, great dude. He recently had a title fight for Tough Enough on UFC Fight Pass that, fought a great guy, just didn't go his way.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, he was a great guy. And I think now that, MMA has become so much more of a global sport, you're starting to see even more, whether they're coming from an Olympic background or not. I think both the UFC and the PFL have done a great job of this, of bringing just more global talent from a lot of other countries that, up until kind of the last few years haven't been as well represented at the, top levels of the sport.
Yeah, except I don't think you have the endless money supply that the PFL seems to somehow keep on conjuring up.
Unfortunately, I do not.
Well, also, hopefully you'll actually be able to break even or make some money, unlike those guys.
Yeah, I mean, man, God bless them. I mean, with the death of Bellator, it's like right now in North America, there's really only two major players at the top level of the sport. And, a lot of people, I remember when that Bellator sale happened, oh, this will be great for the sport. It'll be great for the fighters. I'm like, no, it won't. Like the more players you have at the top level of the sport, the more competition there is in free agency and, the better opportunities some guys can, pursue. But yeah, I mean, it's just, the sport has been kind of going through a bit of a recession in some ways for the last few years. Things have gotten kind of weird. And, I really hope for the sake of the sport and all the fighters in it that the PFL can make it work long term.
Yeah, as someone who is a CEO and a promoter, can you speak to the challenges of running an MMA event in America that's not called the UFC?
Sure. There's kind of a couple layers to it. One, it's attracting, I wouldn't, like, some people use the term casual fans as like a, derogatory description, but, getting regular MMA fans that typically watch most UFCs, it's kind of getting that awareness out in different markets that, like, hey, you watch the UFC every weekend, but that guy who's 11-0, who made his debut last weekend and won by a nasty first round knockout, he actually fought in organizations like the ones that are in your area coming up, in the same way that some people really enjoy, minor league baseball, or they really like college, football or basketball, which serves as the farm system for those.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Sure.
I do want to interrupt you, but I'm sorry for interrupting you. But, you mentioned minor league baseball. Mm-hmm. And it made me think, it just brought something to my head, which was minor league baseball. I'm 90% sure the vast majority, if not all of those teams, would not survive without funding from the major league team that they're affiliated with.
Yep.
So that kind of makes me think, like, so should it not be a surprise that quote unquote minor league MMA organizations have a real hard time surviving without a UFC TV deal or some kind of affiliation?
Yeah, I mean, because in the sport of fighting, whether it's boxing or MMA, but specific to MMA, you brought up a very valid point. If you talk about baseball, which there are some parallels between the structure of the minor leagues and fighting in baseball in terms of like the level of shows you compete on. But yeah, they're all independently owned. I'm not part of the farm league of some major promotion that's kicking down a lot of revenue my way to help subsidize the operation. If you look at football and basketball, the Division I level in the NCAA kind of serves as the overwhelming majority of their farm system. That's kind of bankrolled in a ton of ways. So for fighting, it's like the farm level of the sport, like you pointed out, it's on a lot more like tenuous of footing,
And for a promotion like the one that you're starting, what is the primary, driver for something to survive? Is it ticket sales? You're probably going to say a combination, but if you had to pick one, would it be ticket sales, sponsorship, broadcast rights?
It would have to be a combination of those three. I would say for some organizations that may not be taking as comprehensive of an approach to the business, whether that's just due to available bandwidth or not, ticket sales are important, but you can't like solely live and breathe or die just from that. Your marketing has to be on point. You need to have a good amount of, endorsements and sponsorships coming in to help offset a lot of expenses that you're going to have to incur. Yeah. Broadcasting is important, but at the same time, I think the means of that are changing. It's these linear TV deals that people used to chase in years past aren't really there anymore. Streaming, whether it's, YouTube and ad revenue through that, or streaming through different, subscription-based apps.
It's almost like there's so many slices of the pie now that they're not valuable anymore because they've just been divvied up so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
How familiar are you with King of the Cage?
Very.
I fought in King of the Cage. I don't know if you know, I commentated King of the Cage for maybe a decade, starting when I was like 22 years old.
Nice.
It was so interesting because they really went off ticket sales. I mean, they had the vast majority of their fights were at Saboba Casino. Mm-hmm. And also the fighters got paid based on that. I mean, there were guys, I don't know if you, obviously, Nam Pham is another guy named Thomas Denny.
Yep.
And they used to make 20, 25 grand to fight, like back in 2005 when nobody was making money to fight, because they would sell 300 tickets, 400 tickets each.
Sure.
Yeah. And they were making big money. So, I mean, obviously that organization was doing great on ticket sales. Can you find a region or a home to replicate that?
Yeah, I think it can be replicated in a lot of different places. I think that just, part of it is sometimes you might have to create and enforce a culture that encourages that. You have some promotions in certain markets that maybe didn't stress that as much. Maybe guys weren't required or encouraged adequately to sell tickets. I always try to give guys a great incentive to sell tickets. When it comes to professional fighters, you should always have a purse, but at the same time, there has to be, an understanding of, hey, if I'm going to pay you, $1,500, $2,000, show and win total combined, plus commission on your ticket sales, and you're fighting an opponent that's coming in potentially from out of the area that maybe won't sell as much, like there has to be some tangible way for the promoter to make revenue and profit from that. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. So part of it is just kind of getting that going. And some guys, maybe they haven't had the tools in the past. Maybe they haven't been held to any kind of standard of ticket sales. Whereas, really great promoters in different parts of the country have started and enforced that culture for a very long time. Like my buddy John Rollo up at Shogun Fights in Maryland. He doesn't want to broadcast his events live because he wants people to attend live. He sells out every time. This guy is one of the most successful and consistent, well-producing regional promoters in the country, very quietly. But go to a Shogun Fight show, you'll be amazed that it's a regional event.
That's awesome.
And
listen, let's wrap up here momentarily, but tell us exactly the dates. I know November 22nd, Richmond, Virginia. What's the venue again?
Yeah, so we'll be doing the fights November 22nd at the Greater Richmond Raceway in the main exhibition hall there. It's a great venue. Been to some NASCAR races there in the past. I'm sure you have too.
I've commentated there.
Awesome, yeah. So great, great highway access, tons of great hotels. You're less than 10 minutes from downtown Richmond. Lots of great entertainment and nightlife there for making a weekend out of it or going out after the fights. But yeah, we'll be announcing some of our main matchups and everything else into this coming week. And definitely really looking forward to doing this first Stronghold Fights event in my hometown of Virginia.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you very much for joining the Fight Guys. Guys watching this, remember, the best comment gets a free shirt sent out to you. Make sure you check out Stronghold. Until next week, I'm Erik Apple. You're on the Fight Guys.